Welcome back to another episode of Alamance Extension Eats. You may have noticed I have a new addition to my outfit today. I just got glasses, so we'll see. Hopefully they don't create too much glare. I apologize if they do. It's a lot easier to see now. I've had some issues being nearsighted. But anyway, back to what we're doing today. So last week we made our own stock, and this week we're going to use it as one of the ways to make some really beautiful, tasty, and perfectly textured cooked grains. So whole grains are so good for us. In addition to all the fiber that we get from whole grains, there's a whole host of essential nutrients that we get from grains. Each grain has a different nutritional profile, so it's one of those things, just like fruits and vegetables, that we want to get a variety of them. So here on my kitchen cart here, I have our quinoa that we'll be demonstrating with today, some brown rice. Technically this is white rice, but it's up here. Not really a whole grain, but that's okay. And barley. So this is absolutely not an exhaustive list. There's all kinds of grains out there. So I encourage you to go and explore what is available in your grocery store, in your markets nearby, and then use the resource from the Old Ways Whole Grain Council, which the link is in the chat there, to find recipes that work for some of these grains that you may not have worked with before. So let's see. Backing up. Okay, sorry. Brain lapse. Today we're going to be picking on quinoa because quinoa is the queen of gummy grains. So it's notoriously hard to get right. So we're going to be demonstrating with quinoa. But what we talk about, the tips that we talk about, you can apply to cooking pretty much any grain. So if you have any questions as we go along, please do put them in the chat box. We'll answer them at the end. If you have suggestions of things that you found work well for you when you're cooking grains, throw those in there. We absolutely would love to have a community of ideas and tips that we can build off of. So the first key to achieving fluffy, delicious cooked grains is actually to rinse them. So using a fine mesh sieve, I've got one example here that I've actually rinsed my quinoa in. Here's another example with no grains in them. It's got to have a close weave of material here so that the grains don't fall through. So definitely fine mesh if you're looking for one if you're shopping for one. That's the key word, fine. So grains like quinoa are quite small, might fall through. For grains like rice, you can actually have rice submerged in water and then scoop the rice out, change the water, and that can work to rinse the grains. The key there is that rice has kind of a little bit of a powdery outer coating to it, and that's just starch that, as the grains have rubbed together and transit and whatnot, starch has kind of coated those grains. It's naturally occurring. It's not going to hurt you. It's just that the starch kind of creates this stickiness, and so it makes the grains more gummy. So if you want grains that are fluffy and nice and don't, clump together, the rinsing is really important. With quinoa, it's actually not necessarily starch that's coating the grains. It's a naturally occurring substance as well, but it kind of makes the grain, the quinoa itself, taste a bit bitter, and to some people it tastes soapy. So if you have an issue with bitter quinoa, rinsing it really does the job. So I've rinsed this quinoa, and our next step is actually, we're not going to combine the quinoa and the liquid to cook it in just yet. We're going to turn on our little burner here and add some oil. We're actually going to toast the grain. So to add a little bit more flavor, you can toast the grain before you add the liquid and bring it up to a boil. It can help make a nice nutty flavor and make it actually cook a little bit faster too. So we'll just coat, or not quite coat the bottom of the pan. Let that heat up just a bit, and then we'll dump our quinoa in there. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention at that point. Not really. This can absolutely apply, of course, to quinoa, but also to rice, to barley, really anything, any grain that you're going to be boiling where all the water is absorbed, it can work. So do note that this will change the cooking time a little bit. So if you were originally cooking your quinoa for 20 minutes, you may want to back off to 15. And we'll talk about this again at the end, but this is going to be a little bit, finding the absolutely perfect way to cook grains is a little bit of a specified individual process. So everybody's kitchen is a little bit different. Everybody's equipment is a little bit different. Even if we do the same exact things, everyone's techniques are slightly different. So one key to making perfectly cooked grains is to take notes when you cook the grains and make adjustments accordingly. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. So that's heated up okay. I'm going to go ahead and dump the rinsed quinoa in there. I try to let the quinoa dry just a little bit in between rinsing it and then putting it in the pan with the oil. So what I do is I'll rinse the quinoa and then just put it over top of a bowl that it can just sit on and continue to drain a little bit of that extra water. Okay, so this we will let it toast around for a little while. I've got it on medium-high heat right now for the toasting. This is definitely a step that you don't want to walk away because it can burn. There's not a whole lot of oil in there. You don't want your grains to start burning on you. So we'll coat them as best we can. Let them toast a little bit. Even kind of just shake it around is a good way to coat them. I haven't noticed much of a smell with quinoa once it starts to toast, but with rice, you can kind of smell a little bit of a nutty aroma. So you know it's pretty much good and toasted when you start smelling that nuttiness. It's making quite a lot of noise here. That's okay. It's steaming still a little bit of that water that was on the quinoa. Okay, while that finished toasting, we'll talk about the liquid that we're going to use. So another of my tips is instead of using water, try using some stock or broth. Stock that we made last week. This is the vegetable stock we made last week. You can use store-bought. Homemade is going to definitely be tastier. This is unseasoned, so depending on your flavor preferences, you could also, when you add your stock, add a bay leaf or a sprig of rosemary or some minced garlic or something in there as well. I wait to add things like salt and pepper until the very end, or even until it's on the table and each person can add what they prefer to their own grains. But you could definitely throw a bay leaf or a sprig of rosemary in there, would be quite good. Okay, we'll go ahead and add our liquid. So, kind of loud, a note with, and that's not all the liquid we need. We need another third of a cup. When you're cooking grains, not every grain is going to have the same grain to liquid ratio, and not every grain is going to have a scaled up, well, okay, let me back up. If you double a recipe of quinoa, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to also double the water that you use or the liquid, the broth. So be careful and look up, whether it's on the internet or you can call me at the extension office. We can find what you need, but you're gonna want to check and see for X amount of this grain, how much liquid do I need? So if your ratio is off by a little bit, that's okay. If you end up with some kind of really quite gummy rice or quinoa, it might be that you added a little bit too much liquid. So make a note of that, and the next time you make it, try making it with less. I have found with recipes I found on just out on the internet of quinoa that sometimes recipes say it's a 1 cup quinoa to 2 cups of liquid, and that's not quite right for me. For me, it's 1 cup of quinoa to about 1 3/4 cups of liquid. Remember to use liquid measure for liquid and dry measure for dry things. That's important as well. Okay, so we've added our liquid in here. We're going to bring it up to a boil, so I'm going to turn the heat all the way up. Try not to get over it so my glasses steam up. You want to get it to a rolling boil, so really let it go and let it pop up to a boil. You don't want it to just start seeing the beginnings of a boil. It needs to really roll. And another important thing is to have a lid ready when your grains come up to a boil, because you're going to want to cover it. That's a really important part of the process, is having a good seal in your lid. So check ahead of time that the lid that you've pulled out for your pot is the lid that makes a good seal. Okay, let me think what else I want to tell you at this point. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's coming up to a boil very quickly because we didn't really add a whole lot of water. I just did 2/3 cup of quinoa, dry quinoa, and 1 1/3 cups of the stock. So it doesn't take very long. It's not much liquid that's in there, really. One nice thing about quinoa is that it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. So it makes about triple the dry that you put in. So if you put in 1 cup of dry quinoa, you get about 3 cups of quinoa out of it. Pretty intense. So it makes a lot. We've got a fair rolling boil now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it all the way down to the lowest heat setting, cover it, and let it do its thing. So we'll set a 15-minute timer. So it's 4:13 right now. We will let this go for 15 minutes. And then another key to cooking grains like quinoa and rice is that you avoid peeking at the grains. So once the 15 minutes is up, without lifting the lid, you're going to transfer the pot to a trivet or something where, or another eye that's not on. Remove it from the heat and let it sit for 5 minutes. So my last major key to making perfectly fluffy grains is that rest period, that 5 minutes or however long, usually it's about 5 minutes, after the grains are done cooking is just as important, because it helps redistribute the moisture that's in the pot so you don't have sort of crispy bits at top and soggy bits on the bottom. So don't lift the lid, don't peek at it. Just transfer it to another spot where it's safe. Let it sit for 5 minutes, and then we're gonna fluff it. So I've already done this with another pot, a small pot of quinoa, so you can see what that looks like. So I'll bring it over here. My cork trivet to make sure it doesn't burn a hole in my countertop. Oh, it looks really pretty. Okay, so it's the first time I've taken the lid off of it since I brought it up, down from a boil. And just very lightly, we're not going to smash it around because you don't want to completely lose all the air structure that's in there, that fluffiness. So very gently, and actually it's better to do with a fork. So I'll go ahead and pull out a fork to show you. We're just going to kind of get up underneath the grains and just sort of fluff them. I'm going to bring it up to the camera so you can see a little bit better. Very carefully move around that pot. Okay, so see how it's nice and fluffy? Oh yeah, really pretty. Gail had the suggestion to use a glass lid to watch. You could do that for sure. Then you could get a feel for what it looks like when it's at each stage. But definitely take notes as you're cooking your grains to know exactly the right ratio for you. Because it's, in particular, that grain to liquid ratio is going to be a little bit different for everyone. Perfect. Another resource I've put in the chat is to the Med Instead of Meds website, where there is a infographic handout with a table that gives you values of grains, or I should say directions for different grains for cup increments of dry grains. So if you want to cook a cup of dry grains, which will give you more than a cup in the long run when you're done, then you can use that resource to check. I'm very proud of myself. This is pretty looking quinoa. Yay! Okay. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. Let me think. Yeah, so at this point, if you find that when you lift the lid off and see what's happened to your grains, if you find that your grains are still a little bit crunchy, you can always add just a little bit more water. Doesn't take much, just a little bit of water. Put them back on the heat for a little while longer and see if it kind of fluffs up. If they are kind of gummy, that's okay. Just make a note of it, and next time use a little bit less water to begin with, or stock, or whatever liquid you're using. Let's see. That's pretty much that. Yeah. I hope that this has been helpful. Remember, if you have questions about how to cook a particular grain, or really any food safety related question for me, you can always call or email me. Eventually, maybe you can swing by the extension office and we can talk about it in person. But I will make sure to have my contact information in the description below so that you can get in touch with me if you have specific questions or want recipes for particular grains. Remember to like and share this video if you liked this video. And please do subscribe to our channel. Every time that you like one of our videos, you're helping other people find evidence-based, research-based information to share, which can be hard to come by on the internet. So next week, we will start with pre-recorded videos, actually. So this will be the last of our live videos. But you can still interact with our videos by commenting and, letting us know what you like, what you don't like. Any questions or tips that you have, do put them in the comments. And we'll still be able to answer and talk with you and share details. The videos will still be uploaded every week, every Thursday at 4 p.m. So you can keep to your 4 p.m. Ritual of joining us for episodes of Alamance Extension Eats. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your week, a lovely weekend, and we'll see you next week.